Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Rehami and these are the headlines. Chad's President Idris Deby has died of wounds he received while commanding his army in battles against rebels in the north. On Monday, he won the sixth term in office by securing over 70% of the vote in the April 11 presidential election. A military council headed by Deby's son will now govern the country for the next 18 months. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba says his country does not seek any war or escalation in the standoff with Russia. Speaking to international media, he said Kiev wants Moscow to recommit to the ceasefire in border areas near eastern Ukraine. He said only painful sanctions can deter Russia, but added that the EU is not ready to slap curbs. The EU says Iran nuclear deal participants have reiterated their resolve to pursue diplomatic efforts to revive the 2015 deal during Vienna talks. In a statement, the EU said the talks will resume next week after a break of a few days. The EU is chairing indirect talks between Iran and the United States. The United States has asked its citizens to avoid traveling to India over coronavirus concerns. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention says even fully vaccinated travelers may be at risk. This comes as India reported its highest daily deaths so far after more than 1,700 people lost their lives overnight. Pakistan has registered over 5,400 cases and 137 deaths overnight, with the toll crossing 16,000. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3 million lives and infected over 141 million people. The remaining 14 Premier League clubs have rejected a proposed breakaway league and vowed to protect the best interests of the game. But Real Madrid president Florentino Perez says the European Super League has been created to save football. Real are one of the 12 European clubs which have signed up to the Breakaway League and intend to establish a new midweek competition. Those are the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. Chad's President Idris Deby has died of wounds he received while commanding his army in battles against rebels in the north. Deby won the sixth term in office on Monday by securing over 79% of the vote in the April 11 presidential election. He was expected to give a victory speech, but opted instead to visit troops on the front lines. The government and the parliament have been dissolved. A military council headed by Deby's son will now govern for the next 18 months. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba says his country does not seek any war or escalation in the standoff with Russia. Speaking to international media, he said Kiev wants Moscow to recommit to the ceasefire in border areas near eastern Ukraine. He said only painful sanctions can deter Russia, but added that the EU is not ready to slap curbs. Moscow and Kiev accuse each other of fueling tensions in eastern Ukraine, where fighting has escalated between Ukrainian troops and the rebels in recent weeks. The US and the West want Russia to withdraw troops from the border along Ukraine and Crimea. But Russia says the military buildup is part of readiness drills in response to what it described as threats from NATO. It has also rejected criticism from Ukraine and the West over alleged restrictions on navigation in the Black Sea. Russia has expelled 2 Bulgarian diplomats after declaring them persona non grata. The expulsion comes as a tit-for-tat move after Bulgaria expelled 2 Russian diplomats over alleged espionage last month. Moscow has seen its relations with Sofia deteriorate after a series of spy scandals in recent years. The latest action comes as European nations accuse Moscow of stepping up increasingly aggressive espionage tactics. In addition to Bulgaria, Austria, the Netherlands, Norway and Sweden have recently expelled Russian diplomats. But Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov says Russia is not to blame for the spike in tensions. U.S. Ambassador to Russia says he will fly back this week for consultations about the state of bilateral relations. In a statement, John Sullivan said it is important to speak directly with Biden administration officials. Sullivan added he will return to Moscow before any meeting between the U.S. and Russian presidents. Moscow recalled its ambassador to Washington last month after President Joe Biden called Vladimir Putin a killer. Despite the dire state of relations, Russia has not ruled out Biden's proposal for a summit between the two leaders in Europe. The EU says Iran nuclear deal participants have reiterated their resolve to pursue diplomatic efforts to revive the 2015 deal during Vienna talks. In a statement, the EU said the talks will resume next week after a break of a few days. Senior officials from Iran and the EU have noted some progress in talks that began earlier this month, but Tehran has denied reports of a potential interim agreement on the revival of the previous accord. The EU is chairing indirect talks between Iran and the US, which abandoned the deal 3 years ago and imposed sanctions on Iran. Responding, Iran cut compliance with the deal. Last week, it boosted uranium enrichment to 60%, but it came only after an attack on Iran's key nuclear facility blamed on Israel. The Arab coalition in Yemen says it has downed an explosive-laden Houthi drone over southern Saudi Arabia. In a statement, Saudi state media said the drone was fired towards Khamis Mushait. Meanwhile, the rebels claim they attacked Aba International Airport, which is near Khamis Mushait. A spokesperson for Yemeni rebels said the drone hit an important military site. The Houthis have kept up regular cross-border attacks on Saudi Arabia and a ground offensive in Yemen's Marib region. This comes at a time when the US and the United Nations are pushing for a ceasefire deal. The Taliban claim they have killed 14 policemen in an attack in Afghanistan's northeastern Badakhshan province. Taliban spokesperson Zabiullah Mujahid said they targeted 2 checkposts in Zimbabwe district. In a Twitter post, Mujahid said 3 others were injured in the raid. But a provincial council member said 8 Afghan security personnel were killed and the Taliban also suffered casualties. Abdullah Nani Nazar said the fighters seized weapons and ammo from the checkposts and set them on fire. Meanwhile, 2 members of Kabul's police uprising forces were killed and several others injured in an attack in Herat province. Provincial Governor Syed Wahid Qatali blamed the Taliban for the attack. Qatali said troops blew up an explosive-laden vehicle before it could target the nearby police headquarters. Israeli forces have once again demolished a Palestinian Bedouin village in the southern Negev region. Defense of AL-ARAQIB committee's members says the village has been demolished for the 186th time. Member Aziz Al-Turi said villagers intend to rebuild their houses and other structures as soon as possible. Homes in Al-ARAQIB are inhabited by 22 Palestinian families and are built of wood and plastic. The village was first destroyed in 2010 and rebuilt after every demolition since then. Israeli authorities claim the site where it is located falls under state land. In Israel, Likud party's faction chief says Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is on his way to the opposition. This comes after Netanyahu lost an important vote over who gets to join the Parliamentary Arrangements Committee.
Miki Zohar said Netanyahu's party now realizes that it will not be forming a government. The Arrangements Committee controls the legislative agenda in the absence of a new government. A motion floated by Likud was rejected in a close vote, while a rival, Yair Lapid, managed to pass his proposal. With Lapid's proposal, the committee has 33 members of Knesset, 16 from the bloc that wants to oust Netanyahu and 14 pro-Prime Minister. In a tweet, Lapid said Netanyahu's failure is another small step on the way to an Israeli unity government. President Reuven Rivlin has tasked Netanyahu with forming a government, as he had the most backing from other MPs. The Prime Minister has another 15 days to complete the job, or Rivlin can look at other options.
The Association of Southeast Asian Nations has called a summit on Saturday in Jakarta to discuss the situation in Myanmar. This comes as the European Union imposed its toughest sanctions yet on the military that seized power in February. 738 people have been killed in the military crackdown on anti-coup protesters since then. The 10-member bloc has been trying to find a way to guide Myanmar out of the bloody turmoil. It remains unclear how many leaders will attend the summit in person, but a Thai official says Myanmar's military chief will visit Jakarta on April the 24th. Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for a rejection of hegemonic power structures in global governance. This comes amid rising tension with Washington over a widening range of issues, including human rights. Speaking at the annual Boao Forum for Asia, Xi Jinping criticized the unilateralism of countries. He said international affairs should be handled by everyone through consultation. The president criticized efforts by some countries to build barriers and said the world wants justice. In an implicit rejection of U.S. dominance, Xi Jinping said governments should not impose rules on others. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. In Germany, leader of the Christian Democrat Party, Armin Laschet, has won the backing of Chancellor Angela Merkel's party to succeed her in September polls. He bagged the 77% of the support from the party's executive board members. His rival, Markus Söder of the Christian Social Union, received only 22% support of the board. Söder said he accepted Laschet's victory and only a united party could be successful at the polls. Merkel, who has been a chancellor since 2005, is set to stand down at the September 26th federal elections. The United States has asked its citizens to avoid traveling to India over coronavirus concerns. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention says even fully vaccinated travelers may be at risk. This comes as India reported its highest daily deaths so far after more than 1,700 people lost their lives overnight. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 3 million lives and infected over 141 million people. More in this report.
More than a year after the coronavirus pandemic began, the average number of infections reported each day is now higher than it has ever been. Experts believe the major reason behind this is India's latest wave, as the country now accounts for about 1 in 3 of all new cases. New Delhi has announced to allow all citizens aged over 18 to get vaccinated from May 1st. But this measure could further strain supplies in parts of the world reliant on Indian-made vaccines for their campaigns. Meanwhile, as a 6-day lockdown went into effect in New Delhi, thousands of migrants fled fueling fears they could spread the virus to their rural hometowns.
I am leaving because a lockdown has been imposed. Nobody helps us in the lockdown. Not the government and definitely not the rented house owner. But we will have to pay everyone. We are far from home and we are here to work hard and earn for our family back home. In this situation, we will end up doing the opposite. We have to go home. Last time when I stayed here, I spent all my savings in 3 months. I had thought that this time I won't stay. This time, if the lockdown happens, I will go home.
Greece has suspended its planned rollout of Johnson & Johnson's single-dose vaccine, pending review by the European Medicines Agency. Climate activist Greta Thunberg has urged governments, vaccine developers and the world to step up their game to fight inequity after the richest countries bought up most doses and those in poorer nations have gone without. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has warned about an unprecedented spike in the number of deaths.
Deaths rose for the 5th straight week, and more than 3 million deaths have now been reported to WHO. It took 9 months to reach 1 million deaths, 4 months to reach 2 million, and 3 months to reach 3 million deaths.
The US says it will issue specific warnings not to visit roughly 80% of the world's countries due to the virus risks. In the Middle East, Iranians have been criticizing poor restrictive measures as cases surge to new highs. Meanwhile, a New Zealand airport worker has tested positive for COVID-19 just today after the country opened a quarantine-free travel bubble with Australia.
In Pakistan, 137 more people have lost their lives to COVID-19 in the past 24 hours. The health ministry says the death toll has now risen to 16,453. The ministry said more than 5,400 people have tested positive for the virus overnight. Pakistan has recorded more than 767,000 cases so far. The ministry says more than 667,000 people have recovered from the disease, whereas the number of active cases has crossed 83,000. The ministry said nearly 4,500 patients are critical across the country, and the reported positivity rate is 8%. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi has arrived in Iran after completing a 3-day official visit to the United Arab Emirates. In a video statement before his departure from Dubai, Qureshi said he will discuss the regional situation with the Iranian leadership. He said the talks will also focus on promoting bilateral cooperation. The two sides will also discuss the latest developments in the Afghan peace process and the Kashmir dispute. Earlier, in a meeting in Abu Dhabi, Qureshi apprised the UAE's Minister of State about India's human rights violations in Kashmir. Azerbaijan has praised Pakistan for arranging a naval peace exercises. Azeri Ambassador Ali Alizada called on Naval Chief Admiral Mohammad Amjad Khan Niazi in Islamabad. Alizada lauded Pakistan for gathering navies around the world on one forum for collaborative maritime security. Azeri Ambassador and Admiral Niazi discussed matters of mutual interests, the two Moldova, bilateral defense cooperation and regional security. Minneapolis and other U.S. cities are bracing for protests as the jury deliberates on the verdict in the George Floyd murder case. This follows 3 weeks of testimonies in the trial of the former police officer Derek Chauvin.
In their closing arguments, the prosecution told jurors that Derek Chauvin is responsible for Floyd's murder, but the defender argued that their client correctly followed police training, calling him a reasonable officer. The jury is considering testimony from 45 witnesses, including doctors, use of force experts, and police officers. The court has been shielded by barbed wire, high barriers, and armed soldiers from the National Guard. Citing civil unrest threats, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has declared a preemptive state of emergency in the Minneapolis metropolitan area.
This is our moment, Minnesota, to draw around our common humanity. The jury will decide that fate. I don't know what will come back. But what I do know is that we're going to be shaped by the response, both in the coming days and in the months and years to come. So that commitment to protect your right to protest, will continue to do it and do even better. We will protect your life and property, and we will do so within the limits of the law.
More than 200 NGOs have urged international governments to increase aid and save more than 34 million people from starvation this year. In an open letter to the world leaders, they said up to 270 million people are facing food insecurity, with millions on the edge of famine. They said combined impacts of climate change, conflicts, and COVID-19 have contributed to the crises. 174 million people in 58 countries are at risk of dying from malnutrition. Experts warned that this figure will likely increase in the coming months if no actions are taken. In Argentina, conservationists have successfully reintroduced a jaguar family into the Ibiza National Park. It is part of the efforts to save the America's largest feline species. The Brazilian-born mother, Juruna, and her 2 cubs are the second jaguar family to be rewilded in the area. So far, 6 jaguars in total have been reintroduced to the Ibiza National Park. Conservationists say their return will help the park's ecosystem. The species had been driven to extinction in this part of Argentina some 70 years ago. Officials report some 200 to 300 jaguars remain in the country. As vaccination efforts accelerate worldwide, in Hungary, a confectionery has launched a range of COVID-19 jab-themed desserts for its customers. More in this report.
In Hungary, which is one of the worst-hit countries in the European Union by the pandemic, a local cake shop has a unique take on vaccines. The pastry shop has introduced sweet shots as a light-hearted antidote to angst over the different types of vaccines.
It was important for us to do lots so we can show that here people have a choice. There is no registration, there are no side effects. Anyone can try these, as the only possible side effect would be a little permanent smile on the face and good mood.
The delicacies are filled with jellies in different colors and flavors. The sign of our mousse is sweet and sour. AstraZeneca is flavored with lemon.
We as a cake shop do not want to make a campaign for or against. We just want to bring some cheerfulness into our everyday lives.
The owner, Katalin Banco, says she does not want to get involved in the politics of vaccination. Rather, her cake shop serves up an antidote to anxiety.
And now the business updates. The Wall Street stocks have dropped for a second day as strong corporate earnings failed to boost the markets. Investors have pinned their hopes on results from video streaming service provider Netflix and other tech firms to help sustain an upbeat. Airlines and cruise line operators led the losses. The indices of DJI and S&P 500 traded over 0.5% lower, while the Nasdaq Composite Index traded nearly 1% down. Meanwhile, the oil prices surged to over 1-month highs amid expectations of a drop in the U.S. crude inventory. In football, 14 Premier League clubs have rejected the European Super League and vowed to protect the best interests of the game, while 6 English, 3 Spanish and 3 Italian clubs agreed to join the new breakaway league. Real Madrid president Florentino Perez says the ESL has been created to save football financially. Perez said that the top teams had been losing money and that big-name matches would help increase their revenue. However, the president of French soccer club Paris Saint-Germain said any proposal without UEFA's support would not help the sport. FC Bayern Munich CEO Karl-Heinz has also opposed the idea of a breakaway league. The UK says it will do whatever it takes to prevent a breakaway European Super League with 6 leading English clubs. Prime Minister Boris Johnson said ministers will be working to make sure that the league did not go ahead as proposed. More in this report.
The news of a new breakaway league has created an overwhelmingly angry reaction across Europe. 6 English clubs alongside the Spanish trio, Real Madrid, Barcelona and Atletico Madrid, and 3 Italian clubs have agreed to join the new ESL. Manchester United fans outside the club's Old Trafford Stadium were not happy with the plan.
I think this is one of the saddest days in football history. I think it's one of the saddest days in United's history. I was saying this to my friend the other day. Football is one of the unique businesses where you can keep screwing and screwing over the consumers, the customers, the fans, and you don't just lose customers, you'll still carry on gaining customers because there's so much passion and love for it. And this is a thing that these foreign owners, they don't understand. They have no connection to these clubs and they're making decisions with a club they don't own.
Spanish giant Barcelona's fans were also not willing to opt for a new format. In China's capital Beijing, die-hard Barca fan Yang Ji said she was shocked at the announcement.
I'm not so sure about it. If they played some exhibition matches during some not so important periods of the years for soccer, then I would be willing to watch some fierce contest between clubs. But if it affects their own national leagues, that is if it affects the current traditional competitions including the Champions League, then I'm not really in favor at all.
The UEFA says clubs and players joining the breakaway league could be banned from all of its competitions and the World Cup. The 14 Premier League clubs not signed up to the ESL will meet later to assess the proposals and consider a response.
Leeds United have held Liverpool to a 1-1 draw at home in their Premier League face-off. The draw leaves Liverpool in 6th place with 53 points, 1 behind 5th-placed Chelsea. Liverpool dominated the first half as Leeds missed several chances of scoring. Sadio Mane fired the Reds ahead in the 31st minute, netting the ball from 15 metres out. This was Mane's first Premier League goal after a run of 10 games. However, a late header from Leeds defender Diego Llorente denied the Reds a place in the top 4. They remain in the 10th place with 46 points. In cricket, Pakistan have begun training for the upcoming T20 series against Zimbabwe at the Harare Sports Club. The two will play 3 T20 internationals followed by 2 test match series. Green shirts returned to the nets after all squad members tested negative for the coronavirus. The two teams will face off on April the 21st. The second game will be played on the 23rd, while the third on the 25th of April. The first test match will begin on April 29th. Pakistan are charged up after winning the ODI series against South Africa 2-1 and T20 series 3-1. In the National Basketball Association, Russell Westbrook's triple-double helped Washington Wizards beat Oklahoma City Thunder 119-107 at home. This marks the 5th consecutive win for the Wizards, while the 11th straight defeat for the Thunder. Westbrook recorded 13 points, 11 rebounds and 17 assists for his 26th triple-double of the season. Bradley Beal also contributed 30 points for the Wizards. Meanwhile, Denver Nuggets narrowly edged the Memphis Grizzlies 139-137 points. Nikola Jokic scored 47 points for the Nuggets, followed by Will Barton adding 28. In other fixtures, Utah Jazz outperformed Los Angeles Lakers 111-97, while Chicago Bulls downed short-handed Boston Celtics to 102-96 points. Another weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.